Admiral Gray stood at the massive viewing window of the Galactic Council's flagship, his 4 eyes fixed on the dark shapes floating in the distance. The ancient human vessels hung motionless against the backdrop of stars, their metal hulls covered in the dust of centuries. There were 12 ships in total, each one bigger than the next, arranged in a perfect defensive formation even in their eternal sleep. "How long have they been here?" he asked, his scaled fingers tapping against the reinforced glass. Behind him, Dr. Stone checked her datapad. "Based on our initial scans, these ships have been drifting for at least 800 years, Admiral." She walked up to join him at the window, her white research uniform reflecting the dim light of distant stars. "But that's what's strange. They show no signs of decay. The hulls are intact, no radiation damage, no micrometeorite impacts. It's as if time itself has avoided them." Admiral Gray nodded slowly. The human fleet was a remarkable find, perhaps the most important discovery in the last century. Everyone knew about humans, of course. They were part of every young alien's education. The strange beings who had appeared suddenly, spread across the stars like wildfire, and then vanished just as mysteriously. They had left behind ruins, stories, and warnings, but never anything this complete. "The Council wants us to begin research immediately," he said, turning to face the team of scientists gathered in the observation room. "But I want everyone to remember the old stories. Humans were unpredictable. Everything they built had a purpose, and usually more than one." The research teams moved quickly, setting up their equipment around the ancient vessels. Small research ships darted between the massive human warships, their scan beams painting the dark hulls with light. The ships were huge by any standard. The smallest was twice the size of the Council's largest battlecruiser, and the biggest one, presumably the flagship, was simply enormous. "Sir," one of the junior researchers called out, his tentacles waving in excitement, "we found what looks like an entry point. It's just a simple airlock. No energy shields, no defense systems, just mechanical locks." Admiral Gray felt a chill run down his spine. This was too easy. Humans never made anything simple. In all the ruins they'd found across the galaxy, every human facility had layers of security, traps that still worked after centuries. These ships looked almost primitive with their metal hulls and basic design. No energy shields, no quantum armor, none of the advanced technology that modern ships used. Just metal, thick and dark and patient. "Proceed with caution," he ordered. "Dr. Stone, you'll lead the first team in. Basic environmental suits only. If there are any active defense systems in there, our advanced suits might trigger them." Dr. Stone nodded, already pulling on her simple protection gear. Her team of 5 researchers followed suit, each checking their basic tools and lights. They approached the airlock in their small shuttle, the magnetic clamps engaging with a soft thunk that transmitted through their boots. "Beginning entry procedure," Dr. Stone reported through the radio. "The airlock. It's operating perfectly. The mechanisms are responding as if they were maintained yesterday." Admiral Gray watched from the flagship as the research team disappeared into the human vessel. Everything was going smoothly. Too smoothly. He'd studied enough human history to know better. The humans had been masters of deception, hiding their true strength until the perfect moment. These ships, with their simple design and accessible entries, felt like they were inviting visitors in. "Keep broadcasting," he ordered the research team. "I want to know everything you see." As if in response to his words, the lights on the human ships flickered briefly, just once, just for a moment. If anyone else noticed, they didn't mention it. But Admiral Gray saw it, and he understood. Whatever these ships were, whatever their purpose had been, they weren't as dead as they appeared. The ancient human fleet had been waiting, and now it had visitors. Dr. Stone's footsteps echoed through the empty corridors of the human ship. Her light beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls of plain metal that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Behind her, 4 other researchers moved carefully, their basic scanning tools picking up readings that made no sense. "This is impossible," said Dr. Reed, one of her team members. "The metal in these walls, its reading is simple steel, but it's not corroded at all. 800 years in space, and it looks new." They reached what appeared to be the bridge of the ship. It was surprisingly small and simple, just a few chairs bolted to the floor, facing screens that were dark and lifeless. Everything was secure, practical, built to last. No decoration, no wasted space. "Team 2, report." Admiral Gray's voice crackled through their radios. "Sir, we're in the engine room," came the response. "But something's wrong. These engines, they look like basic fusion drives, but our readings, they don't make sense. The power signatures are all wrong." Dr. Stone moved to what seemed to be the captain's chair. It was larger than the others, with more controls built into the armrests. As she passed her scanner over it, something happened. A soft hum filled the air, so quiet it was almost unnoticeable. The darkness around them seemed to deepen. "Admiral," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I think we've triggered something. The ship, it's reading our scans." Back on the Council flagship, Admiral Gray watched as new data poured in from all the research teams. 3 teams had gone into 3 different ships, and all were reporting the same thing. Simple designs hiding impossible technology. What looked like basic metal was actually something else, something their scanners couldn't identify. What appeared to be primitive fusion engines were giving off energy readings that suggested something far more advanced. "Sir," a junior officer called out, "we've lost contact with Team 3. Admiral Gray's 4 eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, lost contact?" They were exploring what looked like a cargo hold, then their signals just stopped. No distress call, no static, just silence. Dr. Stone's voice came through the radio again. "Admiral, we're seeing something strange here. The walls, they're changing. The metal, it's shifting somehow." Through the video feed from her helmet camera, they could all see it. The plain metal walls were no longer plain. Patterns were appearing in them, geometric shapes that seemed to flow and move. Lines of light began to trace themselves across the ceiling and floor. "All teams, pull out now," Admiral Gray ordered. "Something's waking up." But before the research teams could reach their entry points, every light in the human fleet came on at once. It wasn't the harsh, bright light they expected from military vessels. Instead, it was a soft, blue glow that seemed to come from the metal itself. On the bridge, Dr. Stone and her team stood frozen as the screens around them flickered to life. Strange symbols began scrolling across them. Not the ancient human writing they had studied in ruins, but something else, something more complex. "Admiral," she whispered, "I don't think these ships were ever really asleep. They were scanning us while we were scanning them. Everything we saw, the simple design, the basic technology, it was all just what they wanted us to see." A new sound filled the ship. Mechanical parts moving, systems powering up, energy flowing through circuits that had been hidden behind seemingly solid walls. The human fleet was awakening, revealing its true nature after centuries of waiting. And in the captain's chair, a small light began to pulse, like a heartbeat coming back to life. The pulsing light in the captain's chair grew stronger, spreading outward in waves of soft blue energy. Dr. Stone and her team backed away, their simple scanning devices now completely useless against the technology revealing itself around them. "Admiral," she reported, "something's happening with the chair. It's..." Her words cut off as a figure began to form in the captain's seat. At first, it was just an outline made of light. Then it became more solid, more real. Within moments, a human sat before them, wearing a dark uniform with gold markings on the shoulders. His eyes opened, startlingly blue against his weathered face. "Welcome aboard the Thunder," he said in perfect common speech, the standard language of the Galactic Council. "I am Captain Marcus, and you've just woken up my fleet." On the Council flagship, Admiral Gray watched through Dr. Stone's camera feed, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. A preserved human commander. Captain Marcus stood up smoothly, his movements natural and fluid. Not preserved, Admiral. My consciousness was merged with the ship's systems. I've been aware of everything happening in this sector of space for the past 8 centuries. He smiled, but there was something ancient and powerful behind that simple expression. Your civilization has grown impressively since we left. The lights throughout the fleet grew brighter. On every ship, hidden panels slid open, revealing technology that made the Council's most advanced systems look primitive. What had appeared to be simple metal walls transformed, showing layers of quantum circuitry and neural networks that pulsed with life. The missing research team, Admiral Gray said through the radio. Where are they? Safe, Captain Marcus replied. They'd wandered into a defense grid that was still active. They're in a temporary stasis field. Unlike your people, Admiral, we humans never liked casualties during first contact situations. He walked to the center of the bridge, and the floor became transparent, showing a massive engineering bay below that had been invisible to all their scans. Machines were coming to life, assembly lines beginning to move, and reactors powering up with a deep, resonant hum. Your scans woke up our basic systems, he explained. But it was your curiosity that convinced me to fully reactivate the fleet. You see, we've been waiting for a civilization that would be ready for what we left behind. Dr. Stone stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. Ready for what? Before Captain Marcus could answer, alarms blared through both the human fleet and the Council ships. A massive energy signature had just appeared at the edge of the system. Ah, Captain Marcus said, his smile fading. It seems we woke up just in time. Those are Dominion warships, aren't they, Admiral? The ones that have been pushing into Council space. Admiral Gray's voice was tense. Yes, an invasion fleet. We should return to our ships. No need, Captain Marcus said. He sat back in his chair, and streams of data began flowing through the air around him. The entire bridge came alive with holographic displays, showing tactical information that somehow looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. You'll be safer here. The Thunder and her sister ships were built for exactly this kind of situation. The human fleet began to move for the first time in centuries, their formation shifting with perfect precision. What had seemed like basic metal hulls rippled and changed, revealing layers of armor and weapon systems that had been hidden beneath the simple exterior. Now, Captain Marcus said, his eyes glowing slightly as he connected fully with his ship's systems, let me show you what a human fleet is really capable of. The Dominion fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm of metal and energy. 50 ships, their black hulls decorated with red markings that looked like claw marks. They were the most advanced warships in known space, each one carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. Admiral Gray watched them approach from the bridge of the Thunder, where Captain Marcus had insisted he stay. Those are their new dreadnoughts, he said grimly. Energy shields that can shrug off our strongest weapons. We lost 3 systems to just 5 of these ships last month. Captain Marcus nodded, his hands resting lightly on the arms of his command chair. Around him, holographic displays showed the enemy fleet's formation in perfect detail. Interesting design, he said. Very aggressive, very confident. He turned to look at Dr. Stone, who was studying the Dominion ships with professional curiosity. Doctor, would you say their shield technology is their main advantage? Yes, she replied. The energy matrices are so dense that nothing can get through. Our best kinetic weapons just bounce off. A small smile crossed Captain Marcus's face. Kinetic weapons, he said softly. Yes, that would be a problem. If you were using simple kinetic weapons. He pressed a button on his chair, and new displays appeared, showing strange diagrams that seemed to twist in impossible ways. The Dominion fleet had spotted them now. Their ships spread out into an attack formation, energy weapons charging. Their leader's voice boomed across all communication channels. Council ships, you have entered Dominion space. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and we will ensure your suffering provides entertainment for our warriors." Admiral Gray's scales rippled with anger. This isn't Dominion space. They're 20 light years beyond their border. "Standard intimidation tactics," Captain Marcus said, sounding almost bored. "Very predictable. Admiral, you might want to watch this carefully. It's been a while since these ships had a proper test run." The human fleet began to move, not the way modern ships moved, with the bright flare of engines and the shimmer of energy fields. These ships moved like shadows, like they were sliding through space itself. Their seemingly simple metal hulls now rippled with patterns that hurt the eyes to look at. The Dominion fleet opened fire. Beams of energy that could cut through planets lashed out, aimed at the human ships. Admiral Gray tensed, expecting destruction. Instead, something impossible happened. The energy beams hit the human ships and vanished. Not deflected, not absorbed. They simply ceased to exist the moment they touched the hull. "Quantum deletion fields," Captain Marcus explained casually. "Why waste energy stopping an attack when you can simply remove it from existence?" He pressed another control. "Now let me show you what real weapons can do." The Thunder's hull split open in a dozen places, revealing what looked like simple metal tubes. No energy readings, no fancy technology. Just holes in the ship's side. "Sir," one of the bridge crew on the Dominion flagship reported, "the human vessels appear to be deploying some kind of primitive projectile weapons." The Dominion commander laughed. "Projectiles. Against our shields. Let them waste there." The tubes fired. What came out wasn't visible to the naked eye. There was no beam, no missile, no trace of anything moving through space. But 6 Dominion ships simply came apart. Their mighty shields meant nothing. Their advanced armor was useless. They just separated into perfectly cut pieces, as if reality itself had decided they should no longer be whole. "String weapons," Captain Marcus said to the stunned admiral. "Why bother with energy or metal when you can fire bits of folded spacetime?" He stood up, his eyes now glowing with a fierce light. And that, admiral, was just the warning shot. "Now shall we show them what this fleet can really do when we stop being gentle?" The Dominion commander's voice shook with rage as he watched 6 of his best ships drift in pieces through space. "All ships, full attack pattern. Show these relics why we rule this sector." The remaining Dominion ships moved like angry wasps, their formation spreading out to surround the human fleet. Energy weapons charged, missiles launched, and attack craft poured from launch bays by the hundreds. Captain Marcus watched them calmly. "You know, Admiral," he said to Gray, "most species develop their weapons in the same way. Bigger guns, stronger shields, faster ships." He waved his hand, and new weapons emerged from the Thunder's hull. We humans took a different approach. We asked ourselves, why play by the normal rules of physics at all? The space around the human ships began to twist. Dr. Stone's instruments went crazy, showing readings that should have been impossible. "Captain," she said, "these energy patterns, they're like nothing I've ever seen." "Watch carefully," Marcus replied. This is why humans were both feared and respected. The Thunder's sister ships moved into a new formation, their hulls now glowing with patterns that seemed to pull at the eyes. When the Dominion's attack reached them, reality itself seemed to bend. Missiles vanished into pockets of folded space, emerging pointed back at their launchers. Enemy fighter craft suddenly found themselves flying through molasses as local time streams were altered. Energy beams curved around in impossible arcs, turning into loops that fed back into themselves. "Impossible," the Dominion commander screamed. "What kind of weapons are these?" "The kind that come from understanding that space, time, and reality are just suggestions," Captain Marcus answered on all channels. "For example." He pressed a button, and a wave of what looked like gentle silver light washed out from the Thunder. Where it touched Dominion ships, strange things happened. Some ships aged 1,000 years in seconds, crumbling to dust. Others reverted to their raw materials, becoming clouds of unpatterned metal and plastic. A few simply winked out of existence, removed from this timeline entirely. Admiral Gray watched in awe. "I come understand," he said. "If humans had this kind of power, why did they disappear? Why didn't they rule the galaxy?" "Because we learned something important," Marcus replied, his eyes fixed on the battle. "Power isn't the same as wisdom. We could have ruled everything, yes, but that wasn't our goal." The remaining Dominion ships tried to retreat, their engines pushing to maximum power, but space itself seemed to have turned against them. No matter how fast they flew, they couldn't seem to get any further away. "You see," Marcus continued, "we didn't build this fleet to conquer. We built it to protect, to guard against exactly this kind of aggression." He stood up, and his form seemed to flicker between solid and energy. "And now that we've seen the Dominion's true nature, the final attack was beautiful in its simplicity. The human fleet released what looked like streams of golden light. Where they touched the Dominion ships, the metal simply understood it had never been metal at all. The mighty warships came apart like sand castles in the wind, their components returning to base atomic structures. In less than 10 minutes, the entire Dominion attack fleet had been reduced to scattered atoms and twisted spacetime. "Now then," Captain Marcus said, turning to Admiral Gray with a serious expression, "I believe it's time we discussed why we really left this fleet here, and what's coming that made us think you might need it." In the aftermath of the battle, Captain Marcus led Admiral Gray and Dr. Stone to a new room deep within the Thunder. The walls here were different, showing moving images of space, but not the space they knew. These images showed other galaxies, other dimensions, places where the laws of physics seemed to work differently. "The Dominion wasn't the real threat," Marcus said, his voice grave. "They were just the warm-up, a test to see if our systems still worked after 8 centuries of sleep." He waved his hand, and a massive hologram filled the center of the room. "This is what we were waiting for." The hologram showed something massive moving between galaxies. It wasn't a ship or a fleet. It was something that made fleets look like dust motes. A vast, dark mass that seemed to consume light itself. "We called them the Void Hunters," Marcus explained. "They don't come from our universe. They feed on entire galaxies, turning ordered space into chaos. We fought them before, 1,000 years ago." Admiral Gray's scales had turned pale. "How? How did you stop them?" "We didn't, not completely." Marcus's form flickered again, showing more of his energy nature. "We drove them back, but the cost was enormous. Most of humanity had to ascend to a higher plane of existence just to survive the weapons we had to use. Those of us who stayed behind set up guard fleets like this one around galaxies we thought they might target next." Dr. Stone stepped closer to the hologram, her scientific mind trying to understand what she was seeing. "The Dominion. They were being influenced by these things, weren't they?" Marcus nodded. "The Void Hunters send out waves of chaos energy ahead of them. It drives species toward violence, toward destruction. The Dominion was just the first to fall to their influence. Soon, every aggressive species in the galaxy would have started launching wars of conquest." He touched another control, and the room filled with new displays. They showed other human fleets, identical to this one, waking up in different parts of the galaxy. Each one had revealed itself to the local species, just as this one had done. "We couldn't just give you our technology," Marcus said. "You had to develop your own path, your own civilization. But now they're coming back, and you need to understand what we built and why." The Thunder's engines hummed to life, but this time it was different. The whole ship seemed to shift, parts moving and changing that they hadn't even known existed. Through the viewing windows, they could see the other ships in the fleet doing the same thing. "What's happening?" Admiral Gray asked. "The real transformation," Marcus replied. "What you've seen so far, the quantum deletion fields, the time weapons, the reality warpers, those were just our basic systems. Now I'm going to show you what these ships were really built to do." The fleet began to move in perfect synchronization. the space between the ships filled with strings of energy that looked like golden threads connecting them. As they watched, the ships started to merge, their forms flowing together like liquid metal. "This fleet isn't just 12 ships," Marcus said, his eyes now blazing with blue fire. "It's one weapon, split into 12 parts to make it easier to hide. And now, Admiral Gray, Dr. Stone, I need to ask you something very important." He turned to face them, his form now more energy than solid. "Will you help us save not just your galaxy, but all galaxies? Because the Void Hunters aren't just coming here, they're coming everywhere, everyone. And we need allies who understand what's really at stake." The merged fleet hung in space like a new constellation, its golden form defying all known laws of physics. What had once been 12 separate ships was now a single entity that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Parts of it disappeared into spaces that shouldn't exist, only to emerge elsewhere, creating a shape that the mind struggled to understand. Admiral Gray and Dr. Stone stood with Captain Marcus on what had once been the Thunder's Bridge, but was now a control center for something far more vast. Through the viewing windows that were no longer really windows, they could see both normal space and other places. "The Void Hunters will arrive in less than a year," Marcus said, his form now a perfect blend of human and energy. "But we won't face them alone. Look." New displays appeared, showing similar transformations happening across the galaxy. Other human fleets, hidden in different sectors, were awakening and revealing themselves to other civilizations. Each one had merged into a similar golden form. Each one had chosen local allies to trust. "But why us?" Admiral Gray asked. "Why choose the Council as your allies?" Marcus smiled. "Because you did exactly what we hoped when you found us. You were curious. Cautious, yes, but not fearful. You wanted to learn, to understand. That's what humanity learned over its long history. It's not the strongest species that survives. It's the ones who can adapt, learn, and work together." Dr. Stone touched one of the displays, watching data flow through her fingers. "These readings, the power levels are beyond anything we could measure. What exactly is this ship now?" "It's not just a ship anymore," Marcus explained. "It's a bridge between dimensions, a weapon that can fight the Void Hunters in their own realm while protecting our space from their influence. But it needs both humans and your people to work properly. We provide the technology and the understanding of higher dimensions. You provide the connection to this galaxy, this reality." The displays showed more ships approaching, council vessels responding to Admiral Gray's call. But they weren't coming to fight. They were coming to learn, to help, to become part of something greater. "The Void Hunters think they can break reality by forcing chaos into order," Marcus continued. "But we learned a different truth. Reality becomes stronger when different species, different ways of thinking, come together willingly. That's what this fleet really is, not just a weapon, but a bridge between species, between ways of understanding the universe." Admiral Gray looked at his own reflection in the golden walls, seeing how his alien form fit perfectly in this human-made space. "You're not just recruiting allies," he said slowly. "You're creating a new kind of civilization." "Yes," Marcus smiled. "The Void Hunters destroy galaxies. We're going to save them by bringing them together. Every species that joins us brings new ideas, new ways of thinking, new possibilities. Already, your scientists are starting to understand our technology in ways we never considered." Dr. Stone nodded, her hands dancing over the control surfaces. "It's like each of us sees a different part of the same picture. Together, we see the whole thing." The golden ship pulsed with light, responding to their growing understanding. Through the quantum communications network, they could feel other alliances forming across the galaxy. Dozens of species coming together, learning from each other, preparing for the battle ahead. "So," Marcus said, looking at his new allies, "are you ready to help us rewrite the laws of reality itself? Because that's what it will take to win this fight. Not just our technology or your determination, but something entirely new that we'll create together." Admiral Gray and Dr. Stone exchanged looks, then stepped forward to join Captain Marcus at the central control area. Around them, the ship hummed with power from a dozen dimensions, ready to begin the next chapter in the history of not just humanity, not just the Council, but all of space and time itself. The ancient human fleet had revealed its final secret. It wasn't just a weapon or a guardian. It was a seed, planted centuries ago, waiting to grow into something that could unite galaxies and save all of reality itself.